Behind the Gavel. I'm Lori Jennings, Public Information Officer for the Township of Lower Merion, and I'm joined, as always, by Board of Commissioners President Dan Bernheim. Dan, thanks for being here with me today.
As always, Lori, an absolute pleasure, and we're doing this through the world of Zoom on this occasion. So hopefully I don't hit the wrong button somewhere along the line.
Well, if you do, we'll figure it out. The days are getting much shorter and cooler, and we've moved firmly into the what about next year's draft part of the season. And the board has been busy as ever, and we have some updates on a number of topics we've discussed recently.
Yeah, indeed. You know, this is that time of year where we slip into high gear for budget season and for our CIP. And then we have a bunch of items that we wanted to get accomplished before year end, including the Saudo, the Subdivision and Land Development Code. And I know upcoming we have, not that we'll talk about it this time, but I'm sure we will next when it gets to the board about the future fire service. We've got a lot of year-end activities that are around the corner.
So the first up we have is the Saudo, the Subdivision and Land Development Code update. And Building and Planning Director Chris Lesswing updated the board about it in October. And so what is this big news?
Well, the Saudo dovetails with the zoning code, and it is exactly what the alphabet soup part of it, stands for, a subdivision and land development aspect of the code. And it is a separate section in the code, and it sets forth standards for processing land development. And this comes out of the Pennsylvania Municipal Planning Code, which establishes some of this, criteria. And the Saudo probably dates back, initially like at some point in 1930s, amended 1978. And, when we redid the zoning code recently, if we were aspirational, this would have been put out simultaneously, but it just wasn't possible. So what the Saudo covers are certain aspects of design requirements, where the code talks about districts and various districts and what's required there. This literally jumps into the weeds about what you can do in construction standards and the process for bringing them forward. People hear about tentative sketch and preliminary plans and all of that. The Saudo outlines how that's done. And it's supposed to align with the zoning code, and we try to do that, and have tried to do it since we're now in a form-based code with graphics, and focus on some of the mantras we got out of the comprehensive plan, such as dealing with transportation and greening standards and recreational and community amenities and alike. So that's, from 20,000 feet, what we're talking about when we're talking about the Saudo.
So what areas of the code have seen the most revisions?
Yeah, there are quite a few that have been tinkered with, and I suspect as we go through the process, we'll get a little bit more tinkering, because as I said, we got some directives from the comprehensive plan, and within the process of doing this, there were a number of other experts that got their oars into the water in order to assist us with some recommendations. So generally, from the construct of it, we're trying to see if we can make this, an easy to use code, and relying on some of the graphics as it aligns with the zoning code, and to shift away from what had always been, road design for vehicles, and see if we can focus on other modes of transportation that are out there, be it sidewalks or bicycles. And as you know, we have a separate ad hoc sidewalk committee that's taking a look at some of this, and to improve some of the greening standards as to what are the best practices, and also what do we do with recreation and community, recreation and community amenities, and how we fold that in. So the Saudo's broken up into a whole bunch of different sections that are out there to try to deal with this. And not to bore people and go through it, because you really would need the enthusiasm of Chris Lesswing to explain this better than I can. But we talk about, the concept of complete, streets, which we deal with the primary, secondary, tertiary streets and what's going to happen with them with parking and shade trees and how that's going to work, what are going to be the buffers, from various areas. Focus on what's referred to transportation demand management and public transportation. And again, as I said, bikes and pedestrians, and the thing that's around the corner for all of us, electric vehicles. How are we going to deal with that? I mean, it is forthcoming. The number of electric vehicles that are registering is ever increasing, but you have to be able to charge them. So we need to work in the concept of charging stations. And as that technology improves, both with batteries and the charging stations, we will be, making sure that those requirements are there. And, that will be included in new development or even in parking lots, when we, start to set those forth. And in parking lots, we have new greening standards there, so a parking lot's not just a parking lot with, some of its shrubbery and buffers. And again, I think one of the key areas, again, probably under greening is public gathering space, to try to make sure that that's included in any of the projects that are forthcoming. And how do you tie from the commercial areas into some of the already existing public areas, this space. And the other category I mentioned was recreational use. We have required developers to put something in there. And in lieu of that, they can make monetary donations. I've always cringed at that, but we've actually picked up about $1.8 million in rec fees, as it's referred to, which have been used for the Kinwood Heritage Trail and South Ardmore, I think it's walkway, and in Ashford Park. So these are some of the things that are being refined and putting into the Saudo, which has now come out in its first iteration to the board to review.
So the public meeting schedule is fairly aggressive, and we're really looking to have a good amount of public input. And do you feel like there's going to be enough time to gather all the input we're looking for?
Well, we have learned from the zoning code, no matter how many public meetings we have, separate meetings we have, there will be those that say we have not had enough. So we will strive to make sure that everybody who wants to comment on it has that opportunity. And I know there was recently a meeting that was some of our standing committees that Chris Leslie, the head of building and planning, held, so that we'll be able to get, just for example, from our environmental advisory council, some of their input on areas which are within the lane that they travel as a committee, and then from health, get some of their input. So we're going to strive to make sure that we educate people of what's in the current draft and have them focus on their expertise. And for those who want to be able to reach out to our building and planning department, there is a website where they can get access to information and provide comments and recommendations, all of which we're going to collate, circulate to the Board of Commissioners, so we know what everybody has been commenting on as we ourselves go through this before we bring it up for passage.
Sure. And when will the board begin to deliberate the proposed ordinance for Saudo?
Well, we're going to try to do this with some similarity that we did with the zoning code, take certain pieces of it, bring it before the board, have comments, and then bring it back to the board as a whole. If we end up doing this really in the first quarter of next year, I think we'd all be probably running at breakneck speed, believe it or not.
So Dan, will Saudo complete the long cycle of zoning updates?
Well, it certainly will be, a large step of getting there. We have other aspects of the zoning code which still need to be refined or come forward, especially institutional pieces. And we have been warned when we started this process that no matter how much we vetted anything or how much that we thought that we had hit perfection, that we would find some unintended consequences within the zoning code. And that has come forth, and we have to deal with those and do some course corrections. So that's, as they say, it's a living, breathing document, and it's had a couple hiccups. So we need to make those adjustments.
So let's move on to the proposed 2022 budget. And the board continued its discussions in September on some of the items from the budget workshop, including the proposal for a $15 an hour minimum wage for township employees. And what was the result of that discussion?
Well, it is still ongoing. So let's drop back 10 yards. How'd that come forth? There was one of the commissioners raised this when we were having discussion of those who are part-timers in the summer at our pools. And it was raised, well, what their rate is below $15 an hour, should it be raised? The fact of the matter is what we pay is above market rate. And that, we are talking, with all due respect, summer jobs for kids, right? So while if you were on a national level and you were saying, let's deal with the minimum wage, my humble opinion, just one individual, is that that's something that's so far beyond debate that has to be changed and increased that, we need to pay attention to it. But here we are at a municipal level talking about some, part-time people, during the summer. And while we are, as I indicated, well within the range and on the upper end of what we do pay, there's a trickle up effect that everybody needs to look at. So if you're going to pay kids in the summer who are doing jobs at the pool and bump them to 15 an hour, then that impacts other people who are down the line, not just those who are at, a part-time salary less than $15, but also anybody else says, if they're going to get up, a 40% increase, do I get a 40% increase? So we need to recognize what that ripple effect is, and those numbers still need to come out. And I think that once the board looks at this and look at what we do, and that we really are well within pay scales, and that we keep, ourselves on track with that, that it's not going to be a flat increase to, $15 an hour, but this is something that still needs discussion and debate, and to provide my colleagues with information.
Well, that will have to do it for our first segment, Dan, but there's much more to get to. So please stay tuned, and we'll be right back with more Behind the Gavel. Welcome back to Behind the Gavel. I'm Lori Jennings, here with Dan Bernheim, Board President, and thanks again for being here with me today.
As always, Lori, an absolute pleasure.
We have some updates on some personal matters we've discussed recently. First, the Deputy Chief Fire Officer position, and the Fire Committee is scheduled to meet with Chaz McGarvey, Chief Fire Officer, about this position. And when will that occur?
Well, as they say, funny you should ask. When you and I finish taping this, there's another Zoom conference with our fire chief, Chaz McGarvey, and other members of the fire committee, Commissioner Zeloff and Commissioner Whalen and myself, to review this proposal. As you may know, it's not the first time that Chief McGarvey has made a request for a deputy chief, and that he's looking to get somebody who can assist in his duties. One of the areas that we still are running behind is inspection of our buildings, commercial and the large residential properties. There are still a lot of areas of investigation that need to be done, and to assist in the fire marshals. And as I indicated in our first segment, coming around the corner will be some adjustments to our entire fire service concepts through the recommendations of the Future Fire Service Committee. So I am sure that Chief McGarvey will very shortly be making the pitch to the Fire Committee as to why this is even more essential than the last time he made this request.
So what kind of issues do you think are going to come up with filling this position? Well,
look, as is always the case, there's a question of dollars. So that will be, one element that's there. We do contribute quite a bit to our fire service with our, the 6 companies between, the purchase of the apparatus and just the, general support of them, on a yearly basis. And they are requesting increases and need it, in my humble opinion. But that has to come before the board. And then will be the utilization of this. Do we need, the deputy to perform these duties, or is there somebody else that should be doing it? And knowing my colleagues, they will take a deep dive on all of these issues.
Well, the board also voted in October to appoint a new parking services director. And then that person is a familiar face to many in the township.
Yeah, that was a real, feel-good moment. We were able to appoint Jerry Adams, who has been our right-of-way coordinator. Anybody who gets information on Blackboard Connect may recognize his voice. Jerry's been with the township, I think, like 35 years and has a couple tours of duty in public works in different positions, and then in building and planning and right-of-way coordinator. And anybody who has dealt with Jerry just, walks away saying, all right, this is a good guy. So to be able to put him into this position as, parking director was something that all of us were really very glad to do. And I have no doubt that he's going to fulfill this very, very important position extraordinarily well. The recent predecessor was a quick hit, come and leave. We didn't chase him out, but he didn't last very long. So we've needed to fill this position for a while. And we're all really very pleased to be able to do it with Jerry.
Absolutely. And it's an important position to fill for our business districts and residents as people continue to recover from the pandemic and getting our parking situation under control.
Yeah. It is it's a real art regarding parking, about what to do and where to do it in the commercial areas and being able to time that, let alone the income it produces and the expenses to it. So it is something that we have been a little bit lacking for a period of time. So we're glad to have somebody fill this slot.
And speaking of promotions, the police department recently promoted a longtime officer to sergeant.
Yeah, that was another real feel-good moment. John Kuvik, who's been with Lower Merion Police for, I think, about 15 years, was promoted, and he had distinguished himself in certain training and as a platoon investigator, and was in the detective unit for a period of time. I know he received a number of commendations and letters of appreciation from the community. When we as a board received what I'll call the resume, or his list of accomplishments, since we don't live day to day within the police force, we were all just, startled with all that he has done in such a short period of time. And it was very easy for us to understand and then approve his appointment. And I'm sure that all of his colleagues, likewise agreed.
Sure. I have a little fun fact about John Kubik, in that his father was my teacher in high school of world cultures. Well, so that's kind of fun.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a fun fact. So
well, good. So you got some added enjoyment out of that.
I did, for sure. And the ceremony, which we promoted John Kubik officially during that badge ceremony, there was also 2 commendations for exemplary police work and a citizen commendation for 2 township residents. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was really also something special. Officer Eric Curcio was involved in a very, very difficult situation where he was able to de-escalate a situation where there was an armed suspect, and it was a peaceful surrender. It speaks to 2 things. One is the training that our officers go through, but having a training exercise and doing it in real time, in real life, are very, very different. And this was handled extraordinarily well. So we're well trained with some, top-notch people. And then there were some, other officers who were quick in some apprehension of some carjacking suspects. And then there were, as you mentioned, some Citizens Award for Dorothy Coleman and our own township secretary, Jody Kelly, who were pretty prompt in alerting police to, some other situations regarding, carjackers. And this is vital for our township safety. So we were glad to be able to recognize all of these folks at the same time that John Kubik was promoted to sergeant.
Yeah. And finally, you mentioned recently in one of our board meetings that one of your colleagues on the board has been appointed to succeed you in a civic role here in Montgomery County. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I was asked to serve as the president of the Montgomery County Township Commissioner Association, which is an association with all other first-class township commissioners. And it's a group that meets regularly, has educational aspects. We have special speakers that come in, be it some from Harrisburg, our representatives or senators or specialists regarding municipal governance. And we also share, all right, what are you doing with this problem? What are we doing with that problem? And anybody who was paying attention during the time that I served as president knew that our own Commissioner Tiffany O'Neill was the woman behind the curtain, but for her and her organization and pulling it all together, I would have fallen flat on my face. So they decided to remove the curtain and they nominated her as president of the association. And I just wanted to make sure the other night that got recognized, because Tiffany's a real gem on our board, as well as in that very important group.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground this month. Is there anything further that you'd like to talk about before we conclude?
Well, we still live in the COVID world, and you keep us abreast of, what's going on there. And I know that we had, from your last report, 46 new cases in the last 7 days, which is up 3 from before. Within the last month, unfortunately, we've had one death of a Lower Merion resident. Our positivity rate, however, has dropped down to 1.78. So when you compare that to the county, which is 5.52, and there had been, once upon a time, you always wanted to get it below 5, we're at least, showing some success rate there. Our hospitalizations, there's still 13 patients in Lankenau due to COVID. 6 of them are through breakthrough cases. But it remains vitally important that people get vaccinated. And those who are hesitant, I urge you, please take a look at all that's out there. There has never been a safer vaccine. And now that the booster is available for certain groups, Montgomery County has, I believe, a website that tells you where you can go to do that. And for us to really get this in our rear view mirror, vaccination remains the key. We still keep, masks on, and hopefully one day, Laura, you and I are not talking about this at all.
That would be just wonderful, wouldn't it?
Yes. Right.
Well, we're out of time for this edition of Behind the Gavel, and thank you, Dan, for being here with me today, and thank you, Lower Merion, for watching. I'm Lori Jennings, and we'll see you next time. Have a great day.